If you pass your hand over a petri dish containing a tadpole, the tadpole will flinch beneath your shadow. That tadpole cannot write poetry, and it cannot sing, and it will never know love or jealousy or triumph, and it has a brain the size of a punctuation mark, but it damn sure knows how to be afraid of the unknown. Well, so do I, so do we all, but there's nothing particularly compelling about that. Do you see what I mean? You don't get any special credit, is what I'm saying, for knowing how to be afraid of the unknown. Fear is a deeply ancient instinct, in other words, and an evolutionarily vital one, but it ain't especially smart. And that's the thing I wanted to build my entire identity around, the most boring instinct I possessed, the panic reflex of my dumbest inner tadpole. No. I'm not the kind of person who starts businesses. I'm not the kind of person who speaks in public. I'm not the kind of person people fall in love with. I'm not creative. I'm not leadership material. You've probably said some version of one of these, but how often do we define ourselves through fear, as if it were already a permanent part of who we are? Imagine a child who gets angry easily. One day they explode, maybe they shout, maybe they push another kid, or maybe they simply don't know how to say he's hurt. The adults around him laugh. That's just how they are, the angry one. Nobody means any harm, it's just easier to give a child a label than to understand what produced the behavior. So they grow up carrying it. At school, they already expect not to get along with everyone. At work, they're the one who have to confront people. In relationships, vulnerability starts to feel almost impossible. After all, they're not that kind of person. People assume they react with anger. Eventually, they assume the same thing. But what if anger was never the identity? What if it was only protection? Maybe years earlier, showing sadness got them mocked. Maybe asking for help made them feel weak, and anger became the safest emotion available. So because it worked once, it slowly stopped being something they felt and became someone they believed they were. And then, without noticing, they start asking, who do I need to become so this never happens again? I'm just shy, I'm just not adventurous, I'm just not good with people, I'm just not the kind of person who... Maybe we became quieter, more agreeable, more cautious, more independent, or more perfect. Maybe we simply stopped trying certain things. Then little by little, a fear became a definition. Not, I'm afraid of this, but this is who I am. And that's where something begins to change. Because we are far more complex than our fears. Yet, we so often allow one of them to define the boundaries of our entire life. Our decisions become predictable. So do our choices, the places we go, the people we approach, and the things we allow ourselves to try. They all begin to follow the same invisible lines. Life becomes smaller, more repetitive, and more familiar. And perhaps at first this feels like safety. We are equipped to fear uncertainty, the new, the unknown, everything we cannot yet predict. A new path means not knowing what will happen, and not knowing what will happen is exactly where fear begins. So when you define yourself by a fear, you reduce uncertainty. If you say, I'm not the kind of person who starts businesses, you no longer have to wonder whether you could. If you say, I'm not creative, you don't have to discover whether creativity might emerge once you actually give yourself the chance to create. And if you decide you're simply not good with people, you never have to find out what could happen if you learn to connect differently. The definition gives you an answer, it gives you a limit, and a limit can feel comforting when the alternative is uncertainty. But what else disappears when uncertainty does? The possibility of learning, trying, and discovering something about yourself that you could never have known in advance. You don't only reduce the possibility of failure, you also reduce everything that might have come from trying. Slowly, you become smaller than you actually are. Like the tadpole, it can be afraid of the unknown, but it has almost no way of doing anything else with that fear. It cannot write poetry, sing, fall in love, create, or ask what it might become. But you are not a tadpole, you have far more possibilities than your fear can imagine. And yet, sometimes we reduce ourselves to something almost as simple. One fear becomes a personality, then an identity, and eventually, a life. Fear doesn't just make you avoid certain experiences, it quietly edits the menu of lives you believe you're allowed to live. Carl Jung spent much of his life studying what exists beneath conscious thought. He spoke about the personas we develop, the characters we learn to play in the world, the perfectionist, the helper, the achiever, the invisible one, the independent one. These characters can be useful. They help us move through the world and respond to what life asks of us. The danger begins when we forget that they are characters, when we forget there is something underneath them. Because what remains unconscious does not simply disappear. It continues to influence the way we behave, often without us realizing it. And if you don't know who you are beneath the roles you've learned to play, you may begin searching for your identity somewhere else. You may look for it in what you do. You become useful, successful, reliable, needed. You define yourself through your work, your responsibilities, your functions, and everything you do for other people. Or perhaps you look for it in what you have, your possessions, status, money, achievements, or relationships. And there is nothing inherently wrong with doing or having these things. The problem begins when they become the place where you search for an answer to questions like, who am I? Or even beneath that, am I enough? Sometimes fear does something even more subtle. We become afraid of being who we actually are, afraid of realizing what we really think, what we genuinely like, or what we would truly want to do. We may fear accepting ourselves without knowing whether other people will accept us too. So instead of defining ourselves by who we are, we define ourselves by what we do, what we have, or the fears we've learned to protect. And the more we do this, the less we trust ourselves and the harder it becomes to recognize our own value. But what if you began somewhere else? Could you define yourself not by what you fear, but by who you are? That means, what do you like, believe, care about? What do you defend? What matters to you, even when no one is watching? Because when you have some sense of who you are, what you do begins to change, and what you achieve begins to have a different meaning. You are no longer desperately using your actions and achievements to discover your value. You start acting or building from something, moving towards something that already has meaning to you. Perhaps this is part of what Jung meant when he spoke about becoming more fully yourself. The task of life is not necessarily to become someone completely new from what you're now, but it's to recognize that you were never only the character you learned to play, the perfectionist, the helper, the achiever, the invisible one, the independent one. Because your fear will tell you to be careful when something is uncertain or new, but it was never designed to tell you who you are. So the beginning of freedom is not becoming fearless, but it is simply refusing to let fear define you.
If this reflection resonated with you, like and subscribe to The Arise. New reflections await.